Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm here joined with both of them. Usually it's just one of them, but today we're doing a special guest show really on the punitive laws for punishment in Islam. Probably one of the most controversial topics in all of Islam today, to Westerners and to people especially.
The Sharia, isn't it?
The Sharia, yeah. Well, I mean that's the
Sharia law.
That's the caricature, isn't it? So the whole of the Sharia law amounts to this punitive laws. But we will be discussing some of the main questions and some of the most pertinent questions. I'm here joined with Sheikh Mohammed Tawarneh. How are you, Sheikh? And Sheikh Mohammed Osman. So we're here joined with two, inshallah, professionals who will give us their professional opinions on these things as per the tradition. Okay, not apologists, by the way. I mean, do you even know how to do apologetics? I mean, you've never done these things before, do you?
The facts is facts, so we're
going to stick to the facts, and Sheikh Mohammed is definitely not apologetic. Yeah, but he doesn't know how to be. So here, we'll start with the first question. Does Islam believe in an eye for an eye punishment? We'll start with you, Sheikh. What do you think? Line in Surah Al-Ma'idah and other places in the Quran.
This is under it has context, firstly, and this is under the hudud. And first of all, before we come to the hudud, or for example the punishment and all of these things, we need to understand how these laws and these came into existence. That firstly, the Muslim, for example, system were established firstly on a belief base. Firstly, the people they have to believe in Allah.
The foundation.
The foundation, following the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and after that they accepted that as well. And there have to be laws as well, which controls this community, which is they believe in the same concept. And part of it, for example, if someone been harmed, so exactly the same harm has to happen to him by justice.
So you're saying this is not in a context of non-Islamic government. So all of the rules, the punitive laws in Islam,
exactly.
The caveat here is that it has to be within an Islamic framework, Islamic government. There has to be a rule of government.
Exactly. Exactly. That's how.
Do you want to add to that? So what is about the eye for the eye?
I would say, just to follow what Sheikh Mohammed said, it's absolutely key in the whole discussion that there has to be a spiritual, not only a foundation, but it's a spiritual foundation. It has to be in the governorship of Islam, where Islam is established.
So what does it mean, an eye for an eye?
Okay, so I mean, طبعا Allah Jalla wa Ala in this ayah, Surah Al-Ma'idah, is talking about Bani Israel, okay, the people of the Jews, right? However, many of the Mufassirun have claimed that there is consensus that this ayah is also we act upon this ayah, and from this the fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh have taken this ayah and derived many ahkam from it in great detail. For example, such that. An eye for an eye. They mention the issues of qisas and juruh and wounds. They talk about the exact place of the wound, the depth of it, the size of it. Can you do qisas on it? Can you not do, etc.
It's mentioned extensively in books.
Yes, and it all comes down to, is the Sharia of those of old our Sharia as well? Yes. And if there is nothing that goes against this, no Sharia.
No, and this is the thing. SubhanAllah, just to add like a political element to this. Recently, I'm not sure if you guys are both aware, I'm sure you live in East London as well. I mean, there's this whole acid thing. You saw the acid, the people throwing acid in people's face. And to be honest with you, if you do a survey in the majority of the population, we're not saying we go by this, but just for the sake of argument here, as an interesting point, if you do a survey, you'll find that most people will find that the most adequate or appropriate punishment for those who have had acid they put an acid on people, that is, they would have the same done back to them.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, of course.
This one of the aspects. This is one of the aspects which we need to know. Plus, as well, it is linked first of all by the justice of Sharia. Firstly, secondly, as well, now it is related to the person who's been harmed. Now that's his right. It is, which means he is able to proceed to an approval for the punishment to happen to the one who has harmed him in the first place, and he is able, for example, to accept, for example, any compensation from the other side, or at least to forgive him. Simple as that.
I think this is very clear. So we're going to move on to the next question, inshallah.
Which means there is a way. There is a way out.
There's a way out. Yeah. Thank you for both of your contributions. The second question is about decapitation. You're cutting the head off someone. For those who don't know what that means, so why is it the fact that in most Muslim, or many Muslim, not most of them, but many Muslim countries, and historically, classically, you've seen that the way of executing someone has been through this method of decapitation? So do this time, Sheikh. Go ahead.
تفضل شيخ.
تفضل
تفضل شيخ. تفضل. لا respect elders. This is how respect the elders.
Yeah. How do you know he's older?
No. That's the way. That's the way that. Firstly, that's the way. For example, yani, if there is the death penalty, yani, being or the capital penalty being being issued to an individual, which he has done a harm in the society or in the community that deserve this punishment, then at least they said that's one of the things. That's one of the ways, for example, to apply the capital penalty at that time. Even some scholars of nowadays, they said at any way that if the capital penalty been established, for example, now in some countries now they use the shooting or hanging or something like that. All of these things, the capital penalty.
Can we say chemical gas as well, like in America?
They said the minimum thing that could cause pain to the person. The minimum pain could happen to the person. That's one of the things they said. But even though that we know that as we understand, for example, from for the people who study biology, when the veins is cut in from the back of the, for example, of the neck, that literally is like a switch off of the thing. That they said could be the way of. That's why the hanging actually is not actually strangling. It's not stopping breathing. The hanging is literally breaking the neck, and the spine in order to do the capital punishment.
What it is, I think a lot of people in the Western world, agree with capital punishment. There were things that were put out in surveys that were done even in the UK. The majority of the UK population, according to many surveys, were in favour of capital punishment for select crimes. But what must not be conflated is the method of capital punishment as per the Western discourse and Western laws and the Islamic laws. The Islamic laws are much more, I would say, strict in applying them. So, for example, the fact that people have to go, the family of the person who's been killed has a great say in whether or not the person is killed or not. That's not found anywhere in the legal justice systems in the West.
Absolutely.
So it's much more difficult to apply capital punishment in Islamic governments.
Yeah, even certain capital punishments, it's impossible. Not impossible, it's nearly impossible to apply. For example, the punishment for adultery. They say it's rarely been applied in the history of Islam.
Aqil said it's never been applied
exactly.
unless someone
unless it was iqrar, where the person came and just like happened to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he said, I did this, I did this, I did this, for example, and he, other than that, the 4 witnesses to see the actual,
it's impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
and from this, you can actually take the conversation further and say, what is the maqsad of the Sharia in this? Does the Sharia want to apply? Which is the objective? Exactly. What is the objective of the Sharia? Why has the Sharia made it so difficult to apply this punishment this way? Does the Sharia want to establish this punishment? I would indicate not, and that's a very important point.
Not just that as well. Adding to the Sheikh's point, that we know even the person who came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was saying about him that he has committed the ma'ad. Then the Prophet said, maybe you kissed, maybe you didn't do it. So the Prophet was persuading him to tell him not to do it. Even in some narration as well, at the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, a woman being accused to commit theft, she stole something, and she came in the front of Ali radiallahu anhu. He was the judge, and he was saying to her, did you steal? Say no. He was saying to her, say no. So I did. And he was saying to her, say no. Which means, because that's the only thing to remove the doubt, I didn't do it. Simple as that. So the Sharia was in favor not to apply, and that's what this one of misconception. The Sharia is in favor not to apply the punishment. The Sharia is to stop the evil deed in the community.
So it's a deterrent.
It's like that.
Okay.
It is to stop it. It's simple as that.
Even when Ma'iz he began to run away when the punishment was Hijab. When he began to run away, the Sahaba chased after.
One of the companions
and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, why did you chase after him for?
Yeah, so you shouldn't have
let him go.
Okay, very good. Jazakumullah khair. I think that was very, very, very good. And we're going to move to the next question, which is, why didn't Islam completely abolish slavery?
Okay.
And you're going to be writing an essay on this soon.
Yes, I'm writing an essay. It's going to be published soon on the.
You've already got one essay on Aisha's age.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I've written a 7,000 word essay on Aisha on morality, it's called, and I'll be writing an essay soon about slavery and the objectives of the Sharia in regards to slavery. Okay,
let's see what Sheikh has to say. Maybe you can benefit from it in your essay.
First of all, we need to understand Islam didn't initiate slavery. First of all,
yes,
we need to clarify this firstly.
Yes.
But when Islam came, the slavery system was in place already.
Yes.
But Islam control it in a way and restrict it in a way that no any other system was doing the same thing. Firstly, for example, one of the things that Islam did for that the slavery is not inherited from father to son, which means the children of the slaves are not slaves by default; they are free. This is one of the things. That's one of the things. The other thing as well, there is a way out for the slave to be free.
And also the slave, the woman who gives birth to the child, she becomes walad.
Yeah,
she will eventually become free as well.
Of course, she become a walad, which means she will be the under the person who's marrying her, or she's under him if she gives birth until he dies. When he dies, then she's free because of her child. The other thing as well, that there is a way out for the person. For example, in Islam, before mukataba, in many of the for example, compensation of the things that we do, kafarat, and for example, kafarat al-yamin, Allah mentioned expiation. So Allah for oaths and other and there is for oath, for example, and there is another one as well. Sometimes you free a slave for a believer slave, or to free was a slave regardless a believer.
For example, intercourse in Ramadan. Certain things in Hajj as well.
Yeah, subhanAllah. If you understand this, you will see there is a way, there is a hope for the slave to be free. On top of that the slave himself, he is entitled to have kind of something called mukataba between him and the owner, which means I will serve you such and such and do this. Then in that case, fakatibuhum, then they will have a time, and after that certain time, or the things that he will do, and he will be free for that.
Sheikh, I've even seen some tafsir. I was reading a Qurtubi talking about this, and he was making it clear that, obviously you can add to this as well, he was saying that some of the Sahaba were of the opinion that, say for example, and I know there is a khilaf in the ulama, like, between the ulama in this, but he was saying that, for instance, if someone puts himself forward and he says, I want to do mukataba, which means I want to ransom myself, I want to free myself, that person has to do that. So the
owner is obliged to do it.
Yes,
is obliged to do it.
So that would suggest, this is a very powerful and interesting point, because it would actually suggest that the so-called indenture, really and truly, it's not slavery in the Western sense, because we have to be clear.
We have to touch on that point.
It's
not how the West understood slavery.
It's not. It's a racial sense, or whatever.
And it's not as well only related to black people. That's something another misconception. There's always we link, or people they link the slavery.
That's because of the triangular slave trade.
Because of that. But
this actually, has nothing to do with race
at the time Islam, even Arabs, even Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu arda, sometimes as well as slavery it used to be a solution for poverty at that time. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, because he was so poor and he was not able to sustain himself or to provide for himself, what he did, he said he was looking for someone to enslave himself for him. Abu Hurairah, and he's one of the great companions of the Prophet ﷺ, because of the poverty. So it was a solution as well for a people. He will be slave. He will do only serve, for example, his master, for example.
His food and drink is
then his food and drink, his clothes. He will be drink and fed from the same food and the drink of the owner, and he will be as well wearing clothes exactly the same as his owner, and he will live and he will be looked after by that. And as well, that's why many of the pious predecessors, especially women, pious women, they used to literally buy slaves who are disabled ones, or those ones who are not able to look after themselves, because she's woman, and if she's divorced or maybe widow, then she cannot have, for example, she shouldn't have a man around her, but she because she has to take care for her hijab inside her house and so on and so forth. So they used to buy these individuals, those ones who are not able to provide for themselves, so they are literally themselves, they're going to look after them. And there's a good example, for example, Ata ibn Abi Rabah rahimahullah. So he was literally, he was like that, he was kind of disabled person, and he lived under a woman, or a woman bought him to feed him, to look after him. When the day that she wanted to free him, he was begging her to keep him with her. She said, keep me, I want to stay with you, there is no one to feed me. She told him, go to Haram, stay in Mecca, in Haram, learn, and the people there will feed you there, and she freed him at the end of the day.
And just touching on that point, it's quite interesting that the Sheikh Mohammed mentioned that, because it shows you that Islam didn't differ between slaves and non-slaves in certain things. In fact, give preferential treatment to slaves.
Like punitive laws.
For example, in knowledge, Imam sometimes as well, leading the Salah and stuff like this. It was based not on whether you were a slave or not, but based on the knowledge that you possess.
But there was one point that we made that I think is very, very important to emphasize, which is this whole muqaddimah mukataba point, because actually you could argue, and this would be a very, very strong, I would say, sociological or even anthropological argument, that the fact that you have mukataba in play, which is the indentured servants, because I'm going to use this word now. It's not really a slave in the Western sense.
Yeah, it has negative connotations.
It's the indentured servant, because that is a kind of slavery in a sense, but he's a servant because you can trade them. So let's be completely honest. They're indentured servants. The indentured servant has the ability to ransom themselves against the will of, in this case, according to this view that Qurtubi mentions in his of tafsir of chapter 24 verse 34, he's saying that against the will of the Sayyid, or the person who let's say he's the owner, or the caretaker of this person, of this indentured servant. So the point here is that this would undermine the authority. This would completely this would completely undermine the authority of the so-called master, and so therefore, from that angle, it's something unprecedented. It's not even understood in a Western context. So it really must be understood, and that's why the point that you were saying that we should also emphasize on, that it's not a racial. It was not a racial institution at all. There was no they're black or there was no such thing. So these individuals were taken as a matter of reality. And as the Sheikh mentioned,
Islam came to limit that to only
harb
or war.
You could say, I mean, could you say? Let me bring you in a little bit here, Sheikh. Could you say, for example, you have a sieve, or you have some kind of like a sieve, right? You put something into it, like, let's say in this analogy, grains of sand. Islam didn't come, and let's say with something so deeply entrenched into the social fiber,
social political framework.
It will be absolutely impossible, right? Or it would actually have major economic ramifications if the whole system would be abolished all at one go. So all the things that you mentioned, the expiation and all these things, and the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةُ فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ, what would be the good way, freeing the slave. That the higher objective of Islam from a Maqsadi perspective is to free slaves, but the way in which it did it was an incremental, gradualist way.
Absolutely, it was in a sense of kafara or expiation.
It
was in a sense to draw one closer to, or spiritual closeness to God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was one that it had positive effects in the whole social, political, economical framework of that particular society as well, and we can't ignore that fact. Which is why, if you again go back to the question, why didn't Islam completely abolish slavery? We can answer that by saying the high objective of Islam was to abolish slavery, and this is what the Sharia revolves to. So for example, taking our day and age now, slavery no longer exists anymore. It was abolished worldwide, right? And I believe Muslim countries were some of the first to do this.
And some of the last, according to
some of the last,
Mauritania and Saudi Arabia.
Yes, which was illegal, by the way. Not in the legalistic sense, but how they did slavery was unjust. Okay. The question arises now is that should we, if ever the opportunity arose to go back to slavery or give life to the rulers of slavery, should we do it? The answer to that is absolutely not, because the Sharia, the higher objective of Sharia is to free slavery, not to enslave people.
And how can you prove that that's the higher objective of the Sharia?
By looking at how the Sharia treats the slaves, as we mentioned before, and all the kafarat, or the mechanisms in which it turns, or it provided to free slaves.
You know, another thing I think is really, really important in our discussion here is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in Surah At-Tawbah the 9, is it 8 or 9? I think it's 8 or 9 different outlets for zakat. For zakat is one of the pillars of Islam.
Absolutely.
And it's something incumbent upon all the Muslims. One of those was وَفِي الرِّقَابِ,
freeing the slaves.
Freeing the slaves. So this, I would say, probably, if you, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but is this not, right, a clear indication that one of the maqasid of the Sharia, one of the objectives of Sharia, is to free slaves? Because so long as there's zakat, so long as there's Muslims, there is zakat. And so as long as there's zakat, there's freeing of slaves.
Absolutely.
And therefore, if this continues,
then eventually slaves should be completely free.
Isn't that right?
True.
Absolutely.
I think we've covered this
question.
We've covered this question. It was an important question.
Look out for the essay, for the publication, inshallah.
Look out for the essay. I think will be yes. And that's the thing. I think anthropologically, a lot of people, they don't understand that when you're talking about a medieval culture, because Islam came in the medieval period, in the Middle Ages. when we start imposing, post-enlightenment ideas, and even let's just say
anachronistically imposing.
Yes, anachronistically doing that, back projecting these ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, slavery was abolished legally in the United States of America 1867. Okay, yeah, and this was legally, but really and truly it continued and continues into the. One thing I really don't like. I'm sorry, I'm stealing the show.
Economic slavery.
No. It's human trafficking. There's actually an anti-slavery act in the UK, and what we find is that we find the majority of people that being human trafficked now are actually people from different races, and the people who are doing the enslaving and the human trafficking are actually people of, let's say, for instance,
European ethnicity.
Yeah, European ethnicity. So from that perspective,
for the large part.
yeah, this kind, because there's this whole thing of ISIS is doing slavery and it's justified by Islam. But why is it that you find these European, say, agnostic seculars or whatever, liberals doing the same thing? It's a human problem, isn't it?
It's a humanistic problem.
Okay, so now the question, this is another really important question which is asked very, very often by people, which is Banu Qurayza. We know that this is actually mentioned so often repeated. I'm sure we went to Speaker Scholarship. So let's start with you, Sheikh. You've heard this question 100 times before.
Yeah.
600 Jewish people were slaughtered. This shows that the Prophet was butchered unjustly out of the blue. The Prophet, and the companions. This is the narrative, right? They turned around on the people who they had a contract with, and they killed those individuals. Even the young boys, the young boys, they were looking at the pubic hair to find, and they're killing everybody unjustly. What's going on here? What kind of religion is this?
Okay. Now we need to understand again. If you remove it from context, for example, then you will not have the full picture about what happened. Firstly, now we need to know that the Prophet ﷺ, as soon early we discussed that when the Prophet ﷺ, when he migrated to Medina, he wrote a treaty between him and the Jews within Medina, and even that treaty was that they are in terms of people, they are equal citizen inside Medina. If there is a common enemy, if there is an outsider wanted to attack Medina, simple as that. Yeah. So the Prophet ﷺ, that's the treaty between both of them, including Bani Qurayza. Now, when the Battle of Al-Khandaq occurred, and then most of the pagan came to literally to destroy Islam and to kill all Muslims. That's their idea, and to destroy Medina, which was what used to be called Yathrib at that time. Now, Banu Qurayza, instead of helping the companion and the Muslims to defeat their common enemy, what they have done, they were plotting and they were making all of these treachery. They betray the agreement, and they had a hidden agreement between them and the pagan in order to open for them the side which is the back side of Medina. Or
is there any evidence of this?
Yeah, there's the same evidence that they use, that is the same one that you find that they were killed. The same hadith is talking about that this is what happened.
It's Muslims who preserve this.
Yeah, and Muslims who preserve this, and that's how we know in the history. Now, because of this treachery that happens between that happened by Bani Qurayza, then that's one of the things. The Prophet ﷺ, after the pagan being defeated and they came back, they went to Bani Qurayza. Now Bani Qurayza, they're still within their territory, they're still within their land, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he made a siege around them, and they came. The Prophet ﷺ, again, he asked them, at least they didn't even send any apology, nothing. They were all the way. They were stubborn on the way that they were. They said, regardless. Even though, for example, I'm here. We live, for example, if we are sitting in this office, and if there is someone who's going to attack, instead of me helping to defeat that attacker or to remove him or to stop him, I will be siding him against you. Even in the West countries, it's considered the treachery is not something. It's not something could be tolerated.
So, sure.
It's
true then that there was a command
given by Sa'd.
Now listen, there is a story. That's the link here.
Yes.
The Prophet ﷺ, he said. He asked them to, for example, to come to have kind of either agreement or something. They said we'll go under whatever Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiyallahu anhu, and he was injured in the battle. And then Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, they said we accept his judgment, because Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, that Bani Qurayza, and Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he was the head of Al-Aws, radiallahu anhu.
They respected him.
Yeah, they respected him. So they had kind of mutual respect between them. So he said, we'll accept the judgment of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Yeah, then Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, they brought Sa'd ibn Mu'adh while he was injured, and then Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he said, then any man, any fighter who involved, because the men used to be the warriors, the fighters, has to be killed, and then the women and the children has to be enslaved. That was the judgment of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, you have judged them, what is the judgment of Allah from above the seven heavens? Means that this is the judgment of Allah Azza wa Jal.
Approved.
But yet, which means approved by Allah Azza wa Jal. But yet, that they accepted the judgment of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. So they are obliged to obey the judgment
according
of
to
Sa'd.
the agreement.
According to the agreement. That's one of the agreement that they had.
Just to add on this, the hadith of Bukhari was that وَتُقْتَلَ مُقَاتَلَتُهُم. So it was only the fighters that were killed.
Yeah, only
the fighters.
only
Can you repeat the hadith in English?
And that the fighters to be killed.
The fighters.
Their fighters to be killed. It was not
the
whole
innocents.
tribe to be killed and women and children. Everyone.
No, this is
It
false.
was only the fighters.
Okay.
Only the fighters.
Now I want to ask a question, because I remember going through one of the books of fiqh. I found this hadith really interesting. I think there was a bab on it in
A chapter.
A chapter on it. In there, this is I was going through it, and there's a whole chapter on it, talking about, and I want you to remind me of the hadith, either of you. It's talking about the fact that there was a Jewish man who there was a claim that the Jews one Jewish man had killed a Muslim, and then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that you have to get your witnesses before we go and kill the Jews.
Or the Jewish man.
Yeah, the Jewish man. So he prevented the killing of. In this case, he took the testimony of the Jew as more. He gave a preference of the testimony of the Muslim, and he stopped. He did not execute the Jews over and because of the shubha in the matter.
Yes, funny about this. I'm actually writing a paper in Arabic.
Yes.
It's about the principle, a legal maxim, which is al-hudud tasqut tasqut al-shubuhat or tasqut al-shubuhat, which that the punishment, the punitive laws are actually removed when there's doubt in them. So inshallah I'll be writing that soon, and we can probably publish it in Islam, I don't mind, inshallah.
Yes.
So yes. There is another addition to that. Now here, why the Prophet ﷺ particularly, with Bani Qurayza, he dealt with them in this way.
Yes.
What happened when he fought Khaybar? He defeated the people of Khaybar, yeah? And they were more, in terms of number, they were much more, and they were defeated. But did the Prophet kill every single Jews who were defeated in Khaybar? No. He didn't do that. And not just that, the Prophet even
the opposite.
Even he condemned following the one who's running away from the battlefield. Do not follow him. If he run away, don't run out. Don't run after him. So here, why the Prophet he dealt with those ones in this way, and they follow the same faith. They follow the same faith. But yet the Prophet ﷺ and his companions dealt with those ones differently, because those ones, they were saved from their side. They were thinking, Muslims they are saved from that side. No one will come from that side. They're thinking this way. But yet they were plotting, and they were trying, they did this, they betray that treatment. And that's why that's one of the
one of the most I would say unfair misconceptions in this kind of thing is that they did it. The Prophet Muhammad did this because they were Jewish. Particularly.
Then, as the Sheikh said, you cannot ignore Khaybar, you cannot ignore Banu Nadir, you cannot ignore all the other Jewish tribes in which we had interactions, military confrontations with them. And yet they were not dealt with this way. So al-jazaa min jins al-amal al-mukhtalif.
And there is a final thing as well, which was one of the statements one of the scholars has mentioned. I hear it from him. He mentioned, which is generally, he said, if there is an enemy to you, a soldier enemy, and he's wearing, the soldier clothes, and he's your enemy, that everyone, if you went and fought and fight him and killed him, everyone will look up to you, will say, you have done something great because you killed the enemy of the country. Yeah. What about the enemy that he's hiding behind you? You are safe from their side. You sleep in your house thinking that there is nothing will happen from them. What about that? Who's more dangerous? The one, your enemy, who's your neighbor, that the one who's plotting against you, wanted to kill you, is more dangerous than the one, or that, because that one, in the sight of his people, is a martyr. Yeah. But this one is a traitor.
Okay, we need to move on. I think that did require the time. We spent about 9 minutes on that question, but alhamdulillah, I think it was required. But with these ones now, we do need to kind of maybe speed up a little bit our pace.
Sure.
These are very easy questions, So maybe we will require 1 minute. Does Islam believe in freedom of religion?
Islam allows religion to be practiced within the framework of an Islamic country. Obviously, an Islamic governorship. Yes, and of course, this is where the issue of jizya comes into it, which we'll mention inshallah ta'ala.
Yes.
And this is where Islam gave rights to the people that they practice certain religions, as long as it's not spread within the framework
in a military way.
In a military way, and even in a non-military way as well. And there are certain rules, and this is all mentioned in any book of fiqh.
ولا إكراه في الدين.
There's no compulsion in religion, of course.
Very good. Okay, number 6. Does Islam believe in human rights?
Of course, Islam believes in human rights.
I believe Islam set the standard for human rights.
Look at the time. Now, if you think about it, look at the time when the Prophet ﷺ, what's his command? What is his command to the soldiers, not to the people, to the soldiers of this time? He said, for example, don't kill a child, don't kill a woman, don't kill a priest or a rabbi inside their for example, their sacred place. Do not even cut a tree. All of these things. Why the Prophet ﷺ, which means is not a way of destruction. Islam didn't come to destroy land and kill people. Of course, giving human rights, and not just that, and as well, Islam as well treated, for example, the one who live under the Muslim land. For example, at the time of Umar Khattab, when the Coptic person been beaten by one of the Muslims, he came to complain to Umar Khattab, and then the Prophet the Umar Khattab radiallahu anhu, what he did, he told him, he made him they are equal in terms of that, and he gave him the stick. He said, hit him back, the same way that he has hit you. Simple as that.
Yes. One thing that is Sheikh, Jazakumullah khairan for that was a good answer. I think that is sufficient for that. You've definitely covered that very well. We're going to move on to the next one now, which is a very big one in terms of, it's being controversial, etc. It's stoning. Obviously, stoning, by the way, is mentioned in the Old Testament. I mean, if you look at, for example, Deuteronomy chapter number 13, verses 6 to 10, it's very clear that, this is what it says in Deuteronomy chapter 13, verses 6 to 10. It says that if your brother or your brother or your son or your daughter or your wife or your that you love very dearly come and say, let's go and worship other gods in their house, and this is where Islam actually is, I would say to anyone who's watching, much more strict.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at this is the Torah. This is the Old Testament.
Carrying out a punishment.
This is the Christian book. That is believed to be from Yahweh, who is meant to be Jesus. Jesus commanded this. He said that you've got to stone them in their house. Don't give them any justification. You're meant to enact the punitive law yourself, according to Jesus. Because Jesus is Yahweh. According to the Christian, for the Jew is Yahweh himself. He's the one telling you that you've got to stone them in their house. Let's start with that, because I think it's very important that this is not something which is specific in any way, shape or form to the Islamic discourse. But I think you've touched upon this, both of you have touched upon this, you've touched upon this already by talking about these things, like, for example, adultery, and you've also mentioned that it doesn't have to be, for instance, decapitation or hanging. So stoning, could you say you could do the same thing? Does stoning, stoning is because, look, we're looking at Sahih Bukhari. It's talking about stoning with, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, stoning with stones or azm or bones, whatever. That was the material they had at the time. Is it possible that we can say, well, that was the material they had at the time? If the situation, capital punishment is required, does it have to be done with those materials?
I think the question here is the issue which the fuqaha have spoken about, Usuliyun as well. Are the hudud ta'budiyya or not?
Yes.
Are the punishments divinely legislated or not? If we say they're not divinely legislated, then in that case we can extract a ta'leel or legalistic justification for them. Then we could perhaps change that according to time, place and culture, etc., etc. If not, then it stays as they are, and that's an issue which is discussed in the books of fiqh and usul.
Okay.
Again, it's not Islam wasn't the first, for example, to practice this. Firstly, secondly, it's not only subjected to certain gender, because many people because Muslims they only kill the female adulteress, but it's actually for both genders. If they committed it. Thirdly, that even the practice of it, let's think about it as well, that in Islam, that to accuse someone who's married that he has committed an adultery act, that is a big accusation. That's why Islam, you need to have 4 witnesses. These 4 witnesses must be, for example, who are known, that the people who accept their testimony, and they have trustworthy, and they have to see the act itself. Yes. How you can see the act itself, which means behind the closed door, you cannot. And Allah commanded us, Allah and the Prophet ﷺ commanded us as well not to do tajassus, which means not to spy on people. We cannot go on our neighbor and spy on them and all of these things. So if suddenly you didn't plan, you were 4 men, and then you saw, for example, it happens, which is like impossible, which it didn't happen on all of these things. It's never happened in the history of Islam. That's one of the things. Unless if someone admits when he come forward and put him there, they say, I have done it.
Different story.
Simple as that. And he is entitled as well to run. He has that.
So it's self-inflicted punishment.
Yeah, that's something which is important. Again,
this is not applicable to the West.
It's not applicable to the West. It's not applicable. And again, we go back to the main thing which we mentioned in the beginning, that when the people they have accepted Islam and that as a faith in terms of, and they have the foundation, spiritual foundation, and as well they implement Islam on their personal level and then on their community level. Then that and later on as a country level, that's something else.
Yes.
So
I think we've covered that very well. Jazakumullah khairan. Both of you have, I think, covered that very well. Question number 9 is. Question number 8 is why is a person flogged for fornication in Islam? So obviously in Surah Al-Nur, the very second verse talks about flogging 100 times.
The one who's not chaste,
yes.
for example, man, woman as well. Again, look, if you want to, again, it's related.
Not married, never been married.
Never been married.
Yes.
It comes down to the same issue. What is the reasoning behind these things? Can we extract the wisdom from them or not? Can we do qiyas on these things or not? I mean, end of the day, I think a good answer for all of these questions would be to say, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated, this is a very important piece of adjustment, okay, that as Muslims we say and we affirm, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated this, then لا يسأل عما يفعل هم يسألون. Yani he's not to be asked about what he does, rather they're asked about what they do. So we accept this punishment, we accept it's divinely legislated and revealed punishment. And that's it. And
one of the things as well, part of the things that Islam came to preserve as well the lineage of the people, and as well to preserve their rights. Now, because for example, if it's not protected, then brothers will marry their sisters, and all of these things, all this chaos in the society. So Islam came to preserve that in order each one knows who belongs to him, who doesn't belong to him. That's one of the things. That's why Islam kind of restricted all of the, to be, and where marriage is easy in Islam. Unfortunately nowadays, I hope that the Muslims, they try not to follow their culture, to follow Islam better than their culture, because now Islam made the marriages very easy in Islam.
Absolutely.
And that's why if you have a way, why are you going to commit this this evil act, where you are able to marry? And our Prophet ﷺ, he said there is no cure for the love except marriage. And if you love someone, go marry her. Simple as that. And the parents, they have to work towards that rather than leaving their children to fail into this.
Okay, are parents allowed to kill their kids in Islam?
A'udhu billah. Who said that?
What kind of question?
I think they're taking that.
Well, in the Quran condemned this.
Khidr killed, the ghulam or something like this. They're taking it from that.
I think maybe they're probably referring to the fact that there is no qisas on the hadith. There is no qisas on a walid if he kills his walid. But the point is, you cannot establish it's a sin by consensus to kill any soul that's not deserving of it, whether he's related to you, a child or not a child. Yes. And there's no disagreement among the scholars.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. I think that's done, Sheikh. Yeah? No one disagrees with that here. Okay, 38 minutes in. The 10th question here is, does the Quran consider non-Muslims the worst creatures? Obviously this is reference to
إن شر الدواب عند الله
لا
الذين كفروا
أولئك هم شر البرية.
الذين كفروا الكتاب المستقيم من الجهنم. So in terms of that, that's Allah is condemning the disbelief. Simple as that. The disbelief that they have.
Some say from the Mufassirun, I think this is related to, I can't remember from the Salaf who said this. Allahumma salli not Al-Qamah. One or two from the Salaf, you'll find that they refer to Bani Qurayza, actually, what we just discussed. That these kuffar in this ayah, Surah Al-Anfal, is referring to the disbelievers of Bani Qurayza.
So we're talking about Surah Al-Bayyinah.
I'm talking about Surah Al-Anfal.
Oh, okay. In Surah Al-Dawba عند الله.
الذين كفروا فهم لا يؤمنون.
So that's talking specific.
This is according to this tafsir. It is talking about these disbelievers.
Interesting.
Well, the Surah Al-Bayyinah
Yes,
general is about the belief. It's about the belief that there is the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned. He said the worst thing the person could commit, that Allah has created you and you associate with Him.
Because they're not fulfilling the basic human function.
Yeah, that's how it is.
Okay.
It's the greatest oppression that one could do to the Lord.
And you were saying before about separating the person from their actions, or what was that? What was the maximum?
As we mentioned before, that the belief is something, and the person or the fa'il, the doer, is something else. And very rarely does the bara or the hatred in the belief envelop the doer as well. As we mentioned, in certain circumstances, it does apply sometimes.
Okay, why does a person lose their hand for stealing in Islam? السارق والسارقة فقطعوا أيديهم.
Yeah.
Many
Again,
of the similar type of questions.
again, we go back to the same thing. Again, and in a Muslim country, if there is a Muslim and the Islamic system doesn't allow, there is a way. Always, there is no one. If we practice Islam properly, why we need to know why Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, he withdraw this punishment during the time of poverty. Yeah, because there is a reason, there's a shubha that the people they have, there's no way to feed themselves. So if we practice Islam, there is no way someone who's poor. So simple as that. Means there is a zakah. There is a zakah system. People, they will have enough insufficient amount of income. They will be sustained, alhamdulillah, by Allah, of course, through the Islamic system. That's what generally it is. So that's why when Islam condemned this evil act and stealing from others, so that he's breaking the rules of Islam. Simple as that. And because of that, Allah has mentioned this. I mean, they deserve that for it.
We are going to take a break here, just because I know it's. We need to take a quick break, and inshallah when we come back we will finish off the list. We've got another 10 questions, even that we can finish off. Next question. Why can't women lead the prayer, Sheikh?
That's a question. Now we need to know that the rules of Allah Azza wa Jal is not from us to decide. It's from Allah Azza wa Jal, first of all. So when we say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, the meaning of La ilaha illallah is to follow what Allah has said, to accept there is no one worthy of worship except Allah, and to worship Allah alone with no partners, and to follow the guidance of Allah and Muhammad Rasulullah as well, which means you cannot worship Allah except the way that he was worshipping Allah with. You cannot invent something from your side. So as we know that in Islam, that all rules and regulations from Allah Azza wa Ta'ala, or what, and he has sent the Prophet ﷺ to teach us these rules, simple as that. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was leading the Salah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he commanded as well the companion to lead the Salah amongst the one, a male who knows the Quran the most, or who knows the Sunnah the most of the Prophet ﷺ. These are the things which is related to alayhi salatu wasalam. And women amongst themselves, they could lead the Salah like Aisha radiyallahu anha, but they pray in the same row, simple as that. These are the rules of Allah Azza wa Jal. It's not from us, it's not for us to decide, and it's not about, for example, we are not against, we are not, for example, sexist, for example. It's not about that, but it is, this is what
I think a lot of people do have a misconception that leading the prayer necessarily means you are of a higher rank.
No,
because
if that was the case, then why is it a child can lead?
A child can lead.
Yes.
And this was actually done by some of the Sahaba.
6 years old.
No, Amr ibn Salama. He led Salah. He's in Tarawih with his people and stuff like that.
Yes, so he was a child.
Exactly. I mean, the reality is that, look, there's ijma', there's consensus, right? That many claimed consensus that if a woman leads Salah, the Salah is invalid. For those that are behind her, Salah is valid. And others, okay?
Yeah. Behind her, the Salah is invalid.
Yeah, her Salah is valid, but those behind her Salah is invalid.
Yeah, okay? Of course. Yeah.
And look, even Aisha radiallahu anha, I mean, let's look at how the Sahaba understood this. Aisha radiallahu anha, who was a faqihah, al-Dhahabi says that she was the most knowledgeable of the Nisa al-Alameen, the woman of the creation. She would buy a slave, and she would pray behind him in her house.
Yeah, true. That's true.
But she could lead the Salah. Who's more knowledgeable than her at the time? Very few.
Right,
that's their understanding.
I think, so going back to يَرْفَعَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ.
Precisely.
So Allah, He raises those who have been given iman of you and those who have been given ilm in darajat. So there's no way in anyone's standard that 6-year-old boy, for example, if he was leading his mother in prayer, that we would say that he has a higher rank than his mother in any way, shape or form. And in the same kind of way, you wouldn't say that, for instance, someone who can lead the prayer but doesn't understand the meanings of it. He might be more eloquent in reading it, but he doesn't have the knowledge of someone, for example. So the idea is, is it not, because I think here the word imam in the vernacular,
Yes.
especially in Western circles, is seen as synonymous with priest and rabbi, which it isn't.
Which it isn't.
Which is
Yes.
not.
Even let's take, for example, you mentioned about who has the right to lead a prayer more. If we can imagine that there was a group of men who has the right to lead prayer more. For example, the Hanabila, they say that the person who can recite the Quran the most, even if he's memorized the least amount, he has more right to lead than anyone else.
The best recitation.
The best
The
recitation.
best recitation, and not the voice, the right recitation, the right مخارج.
Hanabila say voice.
Wallah.
Yes.
So long as the tajweed is in place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the whole point.
Yeah.
This is the whole point. This is how the standard is. We don't view imam as being synonymous with a priest or a rabbi,
Yeah.
as it's seen in other religions.
And really, you can have a alim and a alima.
Precisely.
You can have a man, alim, a scholar, and you have a woman scholar, and they have an equal ability to do that, isn't it?
Exactly. Precisely.
Okay, Jazakumullah
So-
khair. I think that we've covered that very.
I mean, it's important to put everything that's right in this right place.
You're absolutely right. Now, the next question: why doesn't Islam allow homosexuality? And we have to define terms here when we say homosexuality. We're not talking about, because we've talked about, we've had discussions and debates with people
Yes.
in the park. I've had 2 such debates with, actually 3, I think, 3 or 4,
Okay.
with homosexuals and transgenders and all this kind of things. We have cordial discussions with them.
Of course.
You know, I think that's the way it should be with Muslims and any other subgroup. And by the way, I find it quite unusual, the fact that homosexuals are defined by sexuality. I mean, homosexuals are not only defined by sexuality. They could be black people, they could be white people, they could be Christians, you know, and they could be Muslims, right?
Yeah.
We're not saying that.
A Muslim homosexual is a non-believer.
Yeah.
We must excommunicate him from the religion.
Exactly.
We don't say that.
What is prohibited in Islam explicitly is sexual relations
Yes.
between 2 men,
Yes.
just like there are sexual relations between man and woman outside of marriage,
It's unlawful.
etc.
Between women.
So the
Women-
question is why then?
Now, one of the things which we need to know, firstly, Islam only accommodates a relationship between husband and wife, not even a male and a female. That's well, it has to be only restricted with husband and wife.
It's a sacred gathering.
It's a sacred gathering, so it is not something which is any man with any woman. No, it's not like
Sacred
that.
union.
So Islam condemned that act. Yeah, for example, someone having sexual intimacy with a woman, a man making sexual intimacy with a woman without marriage, without witnesses on that marriage, and without the approval of the guardian, and for example, all of these things. This is not allowed in Islam. Simple as that. As simple as that. So Islam doesn't accommodate that. Similarly, Islam doesn't accommodate, for example,
Any other
relationship outside
Sexual
that.
relationship.
Simple as that. That's how.
But why
it is.
limit it to homosexuality? It could be bestiality.
For example,
Lesbianism.
But to be
No,
fair,
for example-
homosexuality would include lesbianism. Bestiality, I think, with bestiality there is a difference because there is a power dynamic which is very clear. You'd have to subjugate the animal. The animal might not want to do it. Sometimes the animal is like, you're raping the animal, really, effectively. So there are distinct differences, right? But I think the point would be here that, as the Sheikh mentioned, that these are, we believe, divine injunctions, okay, that are meant for the betterment, of course, of for the betterment of all of humankind. Of course, I've done a video. I think people should go to the debates I've done with homosexuals, debating with them on these issues. I think so. That would be. I think you've covered it.
We covered that.
So
Even
yeah.
preserving the race of the human being as well. And
Maqasid.
as well,
Yeah.
one of the things as well, it's preventing the harm as well, as we know that these places are
STDs,
not for the sexual intercourse.
There's no doubt that you're right.
So how
I mean,
is it? Because of preventing the harm?
with the point that you just made there, I think is a valid point, because I think even the World Health Organization and other places, they say that homosexuals that engage in homosexual sex are much more likely to carry STDs. And so from that kind of harm logic, you could argue that to limit it then would be to prohibit it from a personal perspective. But of course, from an Islamic perspective,
Yes.
on a personal level, what people do in their homes, we can't surveil, can we?
Of course, I think that's another issue altogether.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah. All right. So number 14. Number 14. So here's the question: does Islam really say that an apostate should be put to death? Qatl al-murtad. And of course, we've talked about, before we answer this question, we've talked about Deuteronomy chapter number 13,
Yes.
verses 6 to 10. We've talked about that. We've talked extensively about how the Old Testament, and from a Christian perspective, how Christians would see, because for a Christian, Jesus is the author of the Old Testament.
Yes.
There was a time and place for Jesus it would be okay for him at that particular time and place to command the people to stone the apostate in their own home. And of course Islam does not say stone the apostate in their own home, does it?
Of course not. Islam does not, in terms of establishing the hudud or the punishment, it is down solely to the right of the hakim or the ruler to do this and to enforce it. And no one else has any right to do that.
Yes.
I mean, there are certain exceptions with lashing of a slave and the sayyid and the master, etc., etc. But these are very, one or two examples, and there's a lot of discussion in them. But overall, especially what we're talking about here, it is the job solely for the hakim to establish this.
Okay. Anything to add?
No, there is nothing to add, inshallah, except that one of the things, even some scholars, they said they consider it to be, for example, that the had, as we know, it's come from divine. It's not something which is we invented. It's something which is, as we believe, it's from divine, and the hakim, the ruler, he has to establish it. It's not us to do it as individual to go to practice it. That's something important. It has to be in the one with the people.
I think that's yes.
One of the things as well that
is a misconception.
That's
People
a misconception.
we want to go and kill the apostate.
What about the Sharia zones in London?
Yeah, the other thing as well, that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا يحل دم امرئ مسلم إلا بثلاثة, he said one of them التارك للدين المفارق للجماعة. So some of the scholars, they said it's not just only leaving Islam, as well leaving the Jama'ah. And the proof of that the Prophet ﷺ, he knew
what is the Jama'ah then?
Leaving Muslims, which means literally he will be allying the enemies of Muslims, simple as that. He's not just only, he's now going with the enemies of Muslims against them. So that's
haraba,
which is like a haraba. Now
he's waging war against Islam.
That's what he's doing, because the Prophet ﷺ, he never implement this on the hypocrites, where he knows that they are disbeliever. He knows they entered Islam and they left Islam.
No.
Simple as that.
He knew the names of them.
And he knows all of them.
Yeah, he told the hadith of
Hudayfa, and he knows the names of them, and they are disbeliever. And Allah has said they are in the lowest rank of the hellfire, which means
he didn't do anything to them.
But he didn't do anything to them, which means what's the meaning of that? What that leads you? Yeah. Not just that, they used to sometimes missing the salah. They used to not
even Abdullah bin Salul, pray janazah.
Abdullah, he came before that, Allah later on.
Who is one of the main? We know he's not a Muslim.
But later on, Allah has Allah Azza wa Jal later on, of course, on that occasion, Allah told the Prophet not to stand on their here and not to pray janazah on them. So my point is,
he didn't kill him.
My point is that if someone inside is whatever, we are not going to dig inside the people what they have believed, what do you believe. We're not. It's not allowed in Islam to question the people about their faith, what they have, what's that. Generally, except for example, general things.
Get married or something.
For things which is
like
to witness that about this person, about his that he is trustworthy or something like that. But to go to investigate, the Zahir is apparent. And inside the houses, we're not. We don't know. We can't go inside the houses to know what they believe and all of these things. And again, that hadith, when you understand it in its context, then it will make sense. Even though that we have some hadith as well, for example, just only by itself is considered to be kind of a treason.
I think maybe from a Judeo-Christian perspective, especially in the Western world, they look at maybe these verses in Deuteronomy in the Old Testament. There's many verses, not just that one, but this one's very clear, and they associate apostasy with that kind of thing. Someone's in your house, you stone them in the house. You've got someone who says, let's go and maybe I'm thinking of worshiping another god. So they say, okay, we as Muslims would stone we ourselves would enact this punishment. Hey, come here, let me stone you. Of course, this is not what we would do.
This is not.
We wouldn't do it in a Muslim country, in a non-Muslim country, we do it nowhere.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
It's interesting that it's been reported that some of the Salaf, I think Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, and it's attributed to Sufyan al-Thawri, they were of the view that a murtad and apostate should not be killed. And I think some of the modern day scholars they adopted this view as well, and I think it goes back again to the ta'leel or the legalistic reasoning behind why a murtad and apostate should be killed, and it's a long discussion.
Okay, now let's moving on to the next question here, number 15. The question is, why doesn't Islam allow the drawing of Prophet Muhammad?
Why?
لماذا لا يجوز رسم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم؟
Now here we need to know that the Prophet _, himself, even he said about drawing anyone, let alone himself, anyone is not allowed in Islam to draw. before anything of that.
لا إله إلا الله لا حول ولا قوة.
Now to draw anyone. The Prophet sallallahu
We're
alaihi
talking
wasallam-
specifically about the face and the eyes.
Face of a person is not allowed to draw at any
Something
person.
with the soul in it.
Simple as that. Something with a soul, a person or human being or an animal with a soul and moving.
But there is dispute, there is khilaf amongst
in
the
that
scholars.
case, that's one of the things because of the hadith, because of the point of the hadith that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, in the day of judgment, Allah will ask them, will question them, will ask them, "Ahyu ma khalaqtum," or make soul for the
Bring to life
what you have
yeah.
created, what you have drawn. So here, so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that firstly. This is the first thing. The second thing as well is according to the Muslims, whatever we imagine the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's better than what we imagine. Whatever, even for the people who wanted to think about how his image, he's more beautiful sallallahu alaihi wasallam than what we think sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So any attempt to draw him is
as we know that he said that Hassan ibn Thabit خلقت مبرأ من كل عيب كأنما خلقت كما تشاء. He said you were created that with no any deficiency sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just like you were created as if how you wish. Subhanallah alayhi salatu wasalam. So whatever we think about his image is much better than that. So, and for us as well is something which is a sacred character sallallahu alayhi wasallam for Muslims. So for us to try to draw it is kind of humiliating his character, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That's why, because of that, all of these things.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. Okay, number 16. We're going to the next question now. Do Muslims believe insulting Prophet Muhammad is a crime? I don't think there's any doubt in that.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any difference of opinion amongst anyone who ascribes himself to knowledge that insulting the Muslim لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
It's a big crime. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
In fact, it's not even envisioned that a Muslim who venerates the Prophet of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can insult him. That will go against the very basis of Tawheed.
Yes.
Which is to لِتُعَزِّرُوهُ وَتُوَقِّرُوهُ.
And you know, the Quran is very fair with this, because it's okay, well, how comes now you want us to be so good?
I believe that's tantamount to asking, is insulting Allah a crime?
Yes. It's
Coming from a Muslim.
Let's talk about non-Muslims now, because from our perspective, someone say, okay, well, you're allowed to insult us. Is it correct to be allowed to insult their gods and these things?
Again, you mentioned that ayah.
What's the ayah?
محمد هجاب ما شاء الله.
What's the ayah?
ولا فيسب الله عدوا بغير علم.
Yeah.
يعني ولا تسبوا الذين do not insult those who invoke other than Allah, so that they may insult Allah unjustly out of anger. So here, many of the fuqaha, especially Qurtubi, he has a nice and interesting discussion on this. It comes down to اعتبار المصالح والمفاسد. Take into consideration the harms and the benefits. It could be that here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if you insult their gods, their false gods and their deities, then it will lead them to insult Allah, which is a greater crime.
Yes.
So therefore, to warn off the greater evil, we avoid that.
Yes. And of course there are some exceptional rules to that, which we're not going to get into, Abu Bakr and others.
No.
Maybe,
it's time for another place. The house, inshallah.
Yes, maybe the house have a joke
there,
on that one. Now, the next question, question number 17. Did Prophet Muhammad ﷺ say rulership should go to the tribe of Quraysh? Because this is a question of racism. In fact, Al-Mawardi in his Ahkam Sultani and Al-Juwayni. Yes.
You read this?
Yes. No, Ahkam Sultani I went through it. I'm saying Riyasi, I'm not really too tight on it, but.
Subhanallah.
What I was going to say was that, of the 9, I think it's 9 or 12, I can't remember. Is it 9?
Conditions.
9 conditions. One of them is that has to be Quraysh.
No.
So,
because of the hadith. Again, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said al-amat min Quraysh. Now here, because as we know that the Quraysh amongst the Arabs at that time used to be considered kind of well-respected, for example, tribe first of all, and they are before the Prophet was sent amongst them. And they used to be, the descendant of Ibrahim, and not just that, even amongst the other descendants of Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wasalam, that the people, they used to respect them in terms of that because they were people who are, because of the sacred, the nobility and the sacred of the place that they are in, which is Mecca.
You have a lineage yourself to this tribe, do you?
Yes.
You're not going to claim to be the Mahdi one day. You have a lineage yourself, don't you?
I don't know my children.
You're not going to claim to be the Mahdi, are you?
Someone already did from Sudan.
But you're from Trinidad and Tobago and
No,
Sudan.
my
yes?
dad's Sudanese. That's where Al Ahl Bayt goes back to. Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not. This is the point, guys. I wanted to make a point here because I think there's an underlying assumption. The underlying assumption is that if you're from Quraysh, you have to be, let's say, white or like my color, maybe, or the Sheikh's color.
Yes.
But really, you could be your color.
Like
You
my
can
colour,
be,
yeah,
you're a black man, really.
Absolutely. Well, yes, if you want to
Yeah,
say
you're a
that.
black man. You're half Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, yes.
Sudanese. You're a black man.
Yeah, okay. Khair,
No?
inshallah. I ascribe
People would
to my
think. I
father,
mean, I
yeah.
think many people were asking, "Where's the Sheikh from?" Last time we did the
Yeah,
reading
yeah,
list.
yeah. Actually,
Something
that was a
about
popular
Bangladesh
question.
or
We should
something.
have put that question on the reading list.
I think a lot of people think you're Asian.
Yeah, it's true. Bangladeshi.
Yes, you do look. You do look.
I
Like
do
this.
because my mother from Trinidad and Tobago. They're originally from India.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
okay.
where the India look comes into.
All right, so that's what it is, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
but not
no.
to talk about myself. The point being is that look, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, al-Imam min Quraysh. You know, the Imams are from Quraysh.
Yes.
Okay, so this is.
And this is for Khilafa Amma, is it?
yes, Wilaya Amma.
Wilaya Amma.
Kubra.
Yeah. So we're not talking about being a ruler of a country here. We're talking about in the case of a general caliph.
Yes, the Khalifa.
Yes, and that person could be any skin color.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be a white man or a black man or yes.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, we go back to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in which he said that, you know, from the people of Adam, the children of Adam,
Yes.
he chose the children of Ismail, and from Ismail, Bani Kinana, and from Kinana, Quraysh. So, you know,
When Quraysh, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi
It's
wasallam.
the family
From
of the Prophet
Sallallahu Alaihi
Muhammad was from this. But this is not to say that there's any, you know, the hadith of
racism or anything.
of La Fadla.
Of course,
Yeah,
beautiful hadith,
there's no
beautiful
virtue.
example.
Can you tell us the hadith?
There's no fadl,
No virtue.
لعجمين على عربي. There's no virtue for the non-Arab, for the Arab, for the black, for the white, for the black, etc., etc.
And so the best of you are
hadith.
Atqakum.
Is the one who's have taqwa, the one who have
piety, right?
more pious.
Okay, now let's move on to the next one. Something which circulates, especially around right-wing circles, the question of, honor killings.
Honor killings, okay. Yeah.
Honor killings are really, to define them really, is someone has been promiscuous. Let's just say a woman, yeah,
Yes.
because it's usually associated to women. Yeah.
Yes.
So a woman is like someone's daughter, someone whatever, being promiscuous, you know, and now the father brings her, maybe with the family or something like that, and then they kill her.
Yes.
Is this something permissible in Islam?
Of course not.
A'udhu billah.
A'udhu billah. This is perhaps a practice.
That's a crime.
I don't even think the
From
people
the
of
Jahiliyyah. That's the people of
yeah.
Jahiliyyah.
Allahu A'lam, yeah.
This is the first thing, one of the things
Was
that
Jahiliyyah from the people, yes.
the Jahiliyyah, which was the pre-Islam, the
Ignorance.
time of
Ignorance,
ignorance, the
yes.
time of the people away. That this is one of the first things condemned in Islam. Allah mentioned in the
وَإِذَا مَا
Quran,
أُولِدَ
وَإِذَا
الصَّلَاةِ.
مَا الصَّلَاةُ بَأَيْدِيهِمْ قُتِلَتْ. So how the female, and they used to as well, they used to kill the female just because of fearing poverty or fearing that those.
Yes.
But
those
here
girls
it's
they're
more
gonna bring-
specific in Ma'uda, Sheikh. They're talking about a woman
Exactly.
who's gone and done something wrong, but
Yes.
he's still killed her.
Okay, now here
This is
again,
it.
She does say she has
it's
sex.
exactly what. Okay, suppose that. I mean, both genders are condemned in Islam. Both
Yeah.
of them.
But should the man now go and kill her?
No, now regarding the killing is not Islam.
In fact, I
doesn't work like this.
challenge someone to say this is from Islam. Prove it.
That's not from Islam.
Yes.
Prove
Yes,
it.
yes.
It's not mentioned in a single book. A single
But do you know,
textual
it's
evidence.
actually, I'll give you one book it is mentioned. Yes, there is a book out. You challenge? Okay, no problem.
Okay, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
please.
yes. If you look at Deuteronomy,
Oh, okay,
yes,
I see. Yes.
chapter 22, verse 15 of the Bible, there's a very
Okay.
interesting
Yeah.
story of a daughter.
Okay.
The man, he checks her out and stuff to see if she's a virgin, etc. And then she, after, you know, blood checking and all these things from the clothes and the cloth, and they arrive at the fact that she's not a virgin, whatever. So they kill her. They stone her to death. Honor killing.
A'udhu billah.
And this, once again, this is the, you know, the throwing stones when you live in a glass house, because a lot of these individuals who make this claim are actually Christian.
Yes.
So they come from a tradition which says that Jesus Christ is God. So he must be the author of the Old Testament. There must have been a time and place where he ordered the honor killing of the girls
Yes,
in Deuteronomy.
But this
chapter
is slightly
22.
different though,
Go on.
because this is still within wedlock, isn't it? This verse that you quoted, yes or no?
I think so. Yeah, because it was a wedding night and stuff. Yes.
So then it's slightly different to what we're speaking about.
Yeah, but still honor killing, isn't it? He's bringing her and
It's
killing
honor
his daughter.
killing, yes, with the advent of marriage or a union there. Yeah, which to be
No,
honest.
but he's exacting the punishment himself.
Okay, yeah, so that's
Yeah, yeah.
exactly the punishment.
Yeah, that's how
yeah.
is it. So that's why again the punishment and the ruling and all of these things is related to the leader. Firstly, secondly, not because of someone commit that in Islam we are obliged as Muslims to hide the sins of ourselves and the sins of others.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you see something, to hide it, not to expose it, not to bring it, khalas, to hide it. That's how is it. And that's how the Muslims should be. For the second point as well, that if the people committed, for example, the fornication, is both gender are
Are blamed with it.
are blamed. or are blameworthy, regardless what is the gender, the boy or the girl.
That's perfect. Now let's move on to the next question. I think you know the Quran says إنما المشركون نجس فلا يقربوا المسجد الحرام بعد عامهم هذا. Obviously, this suggests that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also said, you know, the Jews and Christians. No, we talked about this.
Not the Jews and Christians. He said mushrikun.
Oh, is it mushrikin? Sorry, the polytheists. They're to be expelled from the Jazira Arabiya, the Arabian Peninsula. Why? What kind of freedom is this? You know, what's going on here?
Sheikh, Fadl.
Yeah. Now we mentioned before again that Mecca is a sacred place for Muslims. Yeah, is a sacred place for Muslims, and people they go there to do the act of worship to Allah Azza wa Jal. So there is no point, for example, one of the things, there is no point, for example, for the disbeliever or someone who doesn't believe in Islam to come to that sacred place.
It's like a big mosque. The whole thing is like a mosque. Isn't
it? It's a big mosque and a place where people come. They don't come for fun. They come to practice their faith and go. Simple as that.
Yeah, and
so it's a sacred place. So similarly, that's why Allah Azza wa Jal or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned, for example, not to the Arab Peninsula, for example, to keep as the whole Arab Peninsula a place where the only Muslim faith being practiced in. Now,
the meaning of this is also many of the fuqaha say this is only Mecca, Medina.
This is the Mecca and Medina, and some of them they said أخرجوا المسلمين من جزيرة العرب. That's it. جزيرة العرب.
I mean, there's a big discussion.
Yeah, I know there is, but going in around the thing, for example, it doesn't mean and that's why it doesn't mean, for example, that if someone comes as a visitor, you know, you need to tell him, you know, to kick him out. That's one of them. Plus, as well, Umar al-Khattab at his time, why he didn't expel, for example, the Jews and the Christians who used to be in Medina. Medina itself, and if you said, even if you go to the opinion that is only restricted to Hijaz or Mecca and Medina, again, why he didn't do that? Yeah, the point is that it's not, these things is not implemented like instantly. It's not like that. So that's one of the things. And
just to add on this, sorry to cut you off, carry on your point.
Yeah.
Many of the fuqaha said that it's permissible even for them to enter, coming back to the point of Ibn Khattab, for the non-believers to enter Mecca, Medina.
Some of them.
If there's a business, many of the fuqaha have said this. If there's a need for business or another need, and they get permission to, then they can enter it and stay up to 2-3 days.
Yeah, for a visit, even the vast majority of the fuqaha.
It's basically a masjid. It's a big place of worship, and nowadays, especially where there's 2-3 million people going in the Hajj season. I mean, you imagine if people are being stampeded to death. Imagine if Jews and Christians and sightseers and tourists would come into the area now. This would congest the area of
even more,
dangerously.
Yeah. It'd be a major health hazard, isn't it?
Yeah. So, anyways, moving on from that, I think we'll move on to the next question. We have here, why can't non-Muslims visit? We talked about Mecca and Medina, so actually that's covered as well. Yes, you did say that they can visit Mecca and Medina, according to one opinion.
According to some opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Why did Prophet? Why can Christians can't Christians build churches in Mecca and Medina? Similar reasons, would you say?
I would say similar reasons. I would say that firstly, you know, the whole issue of within an Islamic land, is it permissible for the non-believers to establish their shrines of worship, which essentially would mean that we are allowing the worship of other than Allah to happen in that country, and that's I think it's a point of consensus that it's not permissible.
Here the thing is, you know, when I went to Mecca, and obviously there was discussion of where is 100,000 prayers valid. So where is the Haram? The Haram, and the majority opinion seems to be that the Haram is the whole of Mecca until the boundaries, right? Yeah. So that is almost as if you're saying the whole place is like a mosque. It's almost as if to say the whole place is a mosque. So the question would be like this, right?
That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, if the whole place is an open mosque, if you like, because 100,000 prayers is there. If the whole place is like a mosque, then the question could be turned around and said, okay, why can't we build a mosque in a church?
You could put it like that, yes.
Yeah, like the Vatican's a massive church, or a place. Why can I not establish a place of worship for Muslims?
In the Vatican, inside the Vatican.
Yes.
Yeah, why can't we not? It's a matter of religion. Anyways, moving on. What's this now? Question number 20. I think we've covered this. Question number 22, right? Question number 22. Okay, why did Prophet Muhammad break the idols after conquering Mecca? You know, there's 360 idols on the Kaaba.
Again, that Mecca is a place to worship Allah alone. It was established initially for that purpose, and even was rebuilt by Ibrahim alayhi salam. and as well revealed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam during his time sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the idea or the point that this Mecca is a place to worship Allah alone with no partners. So this is one of the things. That's why when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, the first thing he came after alayhi salatu wasalam to purify Mecca from any idols which was there. So in order to dedicate all our worship to Allah Azza wa Jalla. That's all.
Okay, I think that's sufficient. Why can't Muslims drink alcohol or eat pork?
Again, so if you want to look at the illah behind it, essentially,
What's the illah?
the illah, the legalistic reasoning, then the ulama have mentioned a number of things. It could be for the harm present within it. For example, alcohol, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, Surah Al-Baqarah, يعني فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. Okay, that there are benefits for it, for the people in regards to alcohol, but the sin outweighs the benefit. The sin outweighs the benefit. As for pork, a similar masala. If not, there's consensus by the ulama, by the fuqaha, that it's najas al-ayn, it's impure in and of itself. That is it in a nutshell.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
Now, next question, number 24. Why do non-Muslims under Islamic rule have to pay the jizya? This is a big one now, I think. We hear this a lot in Speaker's Corner, don't we? I mean,
Sure.
Let's start with you. So, okay, so حتى يعطوا الجزية ثانية لأنهم صغيرون. Chapter 929. We hear this all the time.
Yeah.
Why? What's going on here? Is this a discriminatory tax?
Now we need to understand that the jizya, if you think about it, if you zoom out, then you will find that the jizya, in many occasions, is less than what the Muslim pay as a tax or pay as a zakah to the Muslim government. That's one of the things. Plus, as well, that the one who's paying the jizya, he's not obliged to defend, for example, the country. He's not obliged to do that. And as a citizen, he's not obliged to do it because he is under the protection. So he will gain this protection. He will have all the facilities of the country that he is living in, and everything. He will have all the facilities, and not just that. And he will have as well the facility to practice his faith freely, protected with no one to harm him or her. Simple as that. So
why is there a controversy around this?
Now, the controversy that people, they will say, okay, that's only because they are subjected to their faith. But if they become, for example, the Muslims, they pay more than that, and not just that, and they have to defend their territory. They are obliged if there is, for example, someone or an enemy comes to them, that they are obliged, for example, to defend them, and all of these things.
When they are subservient, they have to pay, meaning they submissively pay this tax.
Now, one of the things is one of the maqasid as well. There is no way. One of the maqasid of paying the jizya, one of the objectives of paying the jizya is as well for those people to think about to come to Islam in a way, and maybe let's consider Islam as a choice. For example, that's one of the things. That's one of the maqsad of this. That when they are being, if they come when they are صاغرون, I don't know what's the right translation to say صاغرون, subdued. When they come to pay it, in order for them to think about what they are doing, they are doing this. Why they live into this humility instead of that Islam is welcoming them with open arms and simple as that.
Well, I think this is connected to another hadith which I'm going to mention, which I think has been terribly caricatured. I'll tell you which one we're talking about. But I find this overrated, in terms of this controversy, because everyone is paying taxes when they're subdued in any country. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I've never paid taxes other than in submission and subjugation, right? It's basically establishing the authority of the Islamic State.
Absolutely. You could say that paying the jizya in and of itself is an act of subserviency, really. The fact that you're paying it, irrespective of how you pay it could be bank transfer. But you're accepting that there's an authority over you.
There's an authority of you and what you do, and you have no choice.
I really don't.
If you didn't do it, something will happen to you.
Look, I do my annual tax returns.
Yes.
And I definitely feel the authority over me every year when I do my tax returns.
You don't do some tax evading yourself?
No, of course not. We don't do this. But
the point is it's entirely uncontroversial. We're all in that state in any country you go, unless you have some kind of tax exemption.
Yeah. Look, let's be honest. Some of the fuqaha, they've gone to I would say extreme lengths, to be honest with you. As a Hanbali myself, talking from the Hanabila, I might get a bit of backlash from me, but the Hanabila, for example, have gone into some extreme things.
I will say
as to say how they should be subdued. As to say he wants to say all the madhab.
But do you know, I've read in the tafsir, for example, that one should be sitting down, not standing up, and these things.
Yeah, I mean, there should be a high chair, and you should give it like that. And I mean, it's all stuff. There is no.
All of this is a matter of ijtihad.
That stuff is not in the Quran and Sunnah.
I mean, look, it's the issue. It's not explicitly, implicitly. I mean, again, it's the ijtihad of the scholars, how they extrapolate these rulings.
The idea is this: if Muslims are
as long as they're paying, they're already subdued. As long as they're paying, they're paying this tax. Simple as that.
Yeah.
We don't go through the details.
I agree. What I want to say is the point I wanted to make is this. I mean, this is in a context.
Absolutely, it's the context of war.
It's a context of war. So why is it important for them to be Saghirun? Because they would, people who have just newly been absorbed into, let's say, an empire, especially in the medieval period,
yes,
naturally will be rebellious to its rulers.
Of course.
So in other words, it's saying let them know the authority has changed.
Absolutely.
That's all it's saying.
You actually mentioned something very important, Akhi, which is that you can't ignore the siyaq. You can't ignore the context in these ayats.
Yes.
You have to. You know why? Because as-siyaq, sibaq al-haq, all of it, the context, the ayat that came before, the ayat that come after it, it's all influential in understanding or grasping a holistic meaning of these verses. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. We can't necessarily just overlook these verses. We have to look at it in the context of war.
And we'll add the last thing as well, that the person as well in the Muslim state, if there is non-Muslim who is living in the Muslim state and he is not able to pay the
pension,
his, for example, his jizya, and he's poor, then he will be paid back by the Muslim government from the zakah money from the Muslims, which has so in Islam. So that at the time of Umar Khattab, that it was brought to him a Jewish man who was old man, was not able to pay. Then they came. Then the Umar Khattab, he gave him from the money of the zakah.
Yes.
So that shows how is it? It's not just only taking only
and
as well.
There's conditions as well.
Yeah, you see,
it's not everyone that pays jizya.
Yeah, that's everyone. Yeah, that's everyone. Which some people are. Some people are not able to pay jizya. They are exempted. Some people even they could be exempted for certain things. For example, for their services or something like that. Yeah, it could be. It's up to the leader. For example, if someone served his country in a way, then the leader he might exempt him or her for his work.
One individual, Sheikh, and this is why the people in the right, especially in the right, and in this country are worried about Muslims. They say things like, one individual I saw him. He's well known. We'll do a reaction video to him one day. I won't mention his name now. I'll keep the suspense. But he was saying that when he's getting benefits, because he's let's say he's radical in his belief system. So he was saying that when he's getting benefits from the government, someone was asking him, interrogating him, he said, why are you getting benefits from the government? So he said that this is jizya. he said this is jizya. The question I wanted to put to you guys: we're not trying to implement any kind of thing like this on an individual, societal, familial, domestic level.
At all. That's simple as that.
Let that disclaimer be very clear.
But this are only academic responses because
we're not going to go to now a place in London and with a gang, Salam gang, and start asking the Jews and Christians to give us
for MMA or jizya or something. We won't do that.
All right, I think that's covered. We've got one more, isn't it? Yes. Why are they called najas?
No.
So why najas is impure? We mentioned that إنما المشركون نجس.
It's a metaphorical type of najas, impurity, referring to their belief. Their
belief is corrupted. Simple as that. Because we don't believe that their belief is right. No. Because of that, their belief is corrupted. Even though some of the Shafi'is, to be on the right, they consider them that literally that impure, but actually that's wrong as well. That ijtihad is a mistake. It's wrong ijtihad to do that. That's why, and the proof that Allah allowed Muslims to marry non-Muslim women who is a Christian or a Jew, Allah allowed it. Simple as that. So because of that, we understand. And
if that was the case, if they were impure in
and of themselves, you're going to do Nasr now.
We don't say that as far as I'm aware. But for example, if that was the case, if they were impure, then it would mean their set was impure and all the kind of bodily fluids, etc., which is not the case. And the question of marriage again is a valid.
But this idea of najasa in Islam is quite interesting because of the verse of what is najas and what isn't. I mean, it's a really drawn out fiqh discussion about what is money najas. Is gambling money? Is it najas itself? That's a discussion among the fuqaha.
I mean, there's certain things that in the Sharia you'll find in the nusus, the textual evidences, the term impure is applied to it.
Yes.
And it's quite well. It's amazing how it's applied to it, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a physical thing. Sometimes it's spiritual.
Yeah,
things,
so it's in reference to
things.
it's in reference to the religion.
Absolutely.
That's how you can put
Acts.
it. Atheism is an impure thing. For example,
Yeah.
it's not pure. That's why one of the things that the prophets came to ask the people to come to is to purity.
Yes.
Moses said that to Pharaoh, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
I think actually here we have concluded. Jazakumullah khairan. I think this has been a very fruitful session.
Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you both. Jazakumullah
Thank
khairan.
you. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair,
For
Sheikh.
inviting us. Jazakallah khair. I hope, inshallah, the viewers benefited from this discussion.
Of course, and this is the kind of content we want to bring forward from Salam, because it's the kind of content that is highly needed, especially in the Western context, where we're not sugarcoating the religion. These people here that I've brought in, that were part of the team, you're not trying to sugarcoat. You have no intent. You don't care about this. And Sheikh Mohammed, he's not trying to sugarcoat the religion. He's giving you from what they've learned. They're giving you their perspectives, and as you can see, guys, it's all very clear. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure that you try and support us in any way, shape, or form that you know how to do so, inshallah, and so we can keep this good work going, and so we can equip the young people of our next generation with this vital information. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.